Imagine wake up and find that the world is again on the brink of a nuclear race in the Middle East. This is not a fictitious scenario. It is a real alert issued by the International Atomic Energy Agency, the AIEA. In its last report, the agency clearly stated, Iran's nuclear program is not dead. Despite severe military attacks, devastating explosions, and heavy economic sanctions, Tehran can resume uranium enrichment in just a few months. But how is this possible? To understand this risk, we need to return to a recent event that drastically changed global geopolitical dynamics. On June 22, 2025, the world watched an unprecedented military attack. Under the direct orders of President Donald Trump, the United States launched 14 bunker-buster bombs against two of Iran's main uranium enrichment centers. The goal was clear: to eliminate once and for all Tehran's nuclear ambitions. After the attack, Trump was emphatic in stating that this was the final blow, ending the Iranian nuclear program. However, reality on the ground seems to be more complex than political discourse. Although the initial impact was devastating, with several centrifuges, the machines responsible for enriching the uranium destroyed, the AIA revealed that the damage was not total. According to Rafael Grossi, director of the agency, despite the destruction of equipment, the basic infrastructure of the facilities still remains, at least in part, intact. Foundations, electrical connections, and auxiliary systems have resisted attack on some areas. Experts say that with time, resources, and qualified labor, Iran could rebuild its enrichment abilities within a few months. And there is another factor that makes the situation even more worrying. Although some of the leading scientists linked to the Iranian nuclear program were killed during the attack, the country still has highly trained technicians. These medium-level professionals have the knowledge necessary to repair or replace damaged centrifuges, which speeds up the reconstruction potential. However, the biggest challenge is not just to restore the functioning of centrifuges. The most serious problem is in the final stage of the nuclear process, transforming uranium enriched into war material, i.e. converting it into metal fit for nuclear weapons production. For this, Iran invested in building a highly specialized Isfahan installation. This research center had as its main objective precisely to perform this critical conversion. Among the facilities hit by the U.S. attack, the Isfahan unit was one of the most affected. According to analysts, the destruction of this installation represented one of the biggest blows to the Iranian program. Without it, the advance towards nuclear weaponry manufacturing becomes much slower and more difficult. Rebuilding a center like Isfahan's is not simple. It is estimated that, in the face of international sanctions and diplomatic isolation, this task may take years. Still, Iran has proven in the past its ability to resilience, bypassing blockages and keeping its program active secret for long periods. Meanwhile, Donald Trump continues to argue that the attack was decisive. According to him, Iran tried for 25 years to develop a nuclear weapon, but recent bombing would finally have ended this effort. For Trump, the Iranian nuclear program has been definitively destroyed and no longer represents a short-term threat. On the other hand, experienced analysts and international observers maintain that the destruction was only partial. In the view of these experts, with time and perseverance, Iran will be able to resume the project, reconstruct its facilities, and move on. This clash of narratives generates dangerous uncertainties in the global scenario. On the one hand, we have the political discourse of total victory. On the other hand, one technical reality that suggests that the problem was not definitively resolved. What the world needs to understand is that the Iranian nuclear issue is not limited to the destruction of some centrifuges or an installation. This is a long-term dispute, where each attack and each reconstruction define the future of safety in the Middle East. And while politicians and analysts differ on the actual impact of the attack, the central question continues. Was Iran really defeated? Or are we just facing the beginning of a dangerous new cycle of nuclear confrontation in the region? In the next block, we will explore in detail a question that still remains secret: the enriched uranium stock that Iran had before the attack. You will find out why, even with destroyed facilities, Iranian nuclear risk remains high and why the United States and its allies cannot yet breathe a sigh of relief. What many do not know is that, even before the U.S. attack, Iran had already accumulated a considerable stock of enriched uranium. It is estimated that, by the time of bombing, the country had approximately 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. For many experts, this amount was dangerously close to the line that separates a civil nuclear program from a project for military purposes. A small technical advance would be enough for Iran to reach the purity necessary to make a nuclear weapon. But the most alarming is not just the accumulated amount, but the way the country stored this material. According to AIEA, this stock was strategically stored in easily transported places, just so that it could be removed rapidly in case of threat. This detail raises an immediate concern. Iran could have transported the material for safe hiding places before the attack. In other words, even with heavy bombing on enrichment facilities, a significant part of enriched uranium could have been saved. This completely changes the game. The United States and its allies simply are not sure where these stocks are located at this time. Uncertainty about the whereabouts of the material makes the situation even more tense. Without access to secret places international, inspectors are tied hands, unable to evaluate the true state of the Iranian program. And the scenario gets worse further when we take into account another factor. AIEA reports indicate that, before the attack, Iran had already taken several measures to protect and disperse their inventory of enriched uranium. This demonstrates that the regime in Tehran was fully aware of the risk of suffering attacks and, therefore, elaborated robust contingency plans to preserve their more valuable nuclear resources. Available information indicates that the material was stored in special containers that can be easily hidden and quickly transported to remote or underground locations. This strategy of dispersion dramatically complicates the task of intelligence organs and Western powers, which now face a true nuclear treasure hunt in the middle of the Middle East. Even if the attack has destroyed essential laboratories and equipment, the possibility that a significant part of the enriched uranium stock has been preserved keeps the Iranian threat alive. Moreover, the doubt about the real extent of damage feeds a scenario of uncertainty, in which no one knows for sure how long Iran would take to resume its nuclear activities. What's more, experts warn that if the country has even protected its inventory, it could quickly restart the enrichment cycle from the point where it was interrupted, saving months or even years of work. The central issue at this time revolves around Iran's ability to rebuild its facilities and, especially, from its political disposition to do so. To make matters worse, the regional political situation is increasingly polarized. On the one hand, the Trump government and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu maintain an aggressive stance, with public speeches indicating that new military attacks can happen if Iran tries to reactivate its nuclear program. On the other hand, analysts warn that, despite the damage suffered, Iran still has technical conditions to resume its nuclear program, if you decide to go this way. And as this tension increases, a recent decision by the Iranian government lit an even more intense red alert on the international scene. A few days after the attack, Iran officially announced the total cut of cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency. This means that from that moment, AIEA inspectors no longer have access to Iranian nuclear facilities. The country began to operate in the dark without accounting to the international community about what it does, where it does, and what speed it does. In practice, this gives Iran full freedom to rebuild its facilities, enrich uranium, and even perform tests without any external interference. This movement has raised the level of tension to levels rarely seen in recent years. After all, if the AEA once could at least monitor part of the Iranian program, now that is not possible. Diplomacy has temporarily lost its main surveillance mechanism. In this new scenario, the risks of military climbing multiply. The United States and Israel have already made it clear that if Iran again enriches uranium at levels close to those needed for a nuclear weapon, additional attacks may occur. At the same time, Iran seems willing to move on, challenging sanctions and military threats, betting on its ability to resist and rebuild. The question that hangs over the world is now, how will Iran go to go? In the next and last block, we will analyze the possible developments of this crisis, the global impact of a possible return of Iran on uranium enrichment, and how it can affect the power balance in the Middle East and beyond. Get ready to understand what is at stake. The International Atomic Energy Agency, AIEA, warned that Iran can resume uranium enrichment in a few months, despite the attacks suffered. On June 22, 2025, the U.S. launched 14 bunker-buster bombs against uranium enrichment centers in Iran, ordered by Donald Trump. Although many centrifuges have been destroyed, basic infrastructure survived, allowing possible reconstruction within a few months. Iran also has technicians trained to restore or replace centrifuges, but the biggest challenge is to turn uranium into war material. The attack has destroyed important facilities, such as Isfahan's, essential for converting metal uranium, which can significantly delay nuclear weapons production. Trump stated that the attack was decisive and eliminated Iran's nuclear ambitions, saying that the country will not resume the nuclear program anytime soon. Before the attack, Iran had 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium stored in easy-to-transport places, increasing the risk of concealment. Inventories may have been moved for safe hiding places, making it difficult to track the U.S. and its allies. Despite U.S. military pressure and Israel, experts warn that Iran is still able to resume its program and there may be new attacks. Iran has cut cooperation with the IAEA, preventing international inspections, and can restart enrichment in months, keeping the nuclear threat alive. What this picture reveals to us is that the Middle East walks over a fine line, where any spark can trigger a chain reaction of unpredictable proportions. If Iran actually decides large-scale enrichment, regional balance can be hopelessly affected. Israel, known for its zero-tolerance policy regarding nuclear threats, has already made it clear that it will not allow the construction of an Iranian bomb. The United States-backed Israeli government can respond with further surgical attacks, even more devastating, aiming to prevent any additional advance. The risk of an open war, which today seems remote to many, cannot be discarded. And it is not just a regional issue. A nuclear crisis in the Middle East would immediately affect global security, impacting financial markets, international oil trade, and even food and energy supply chains. In addition, a military escalation could involve powers such as Russia and China, which have strategic interests in the region and sometimes support Tehran in international forums. The resumption of uranium enrichment by Iran would also represent a hard blow to the global system of nuclear non-proliferation, weakening the role of organisms such as the IAEA and putting other countries on alert. Neighbor states of Iran, such as Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, could accelerate their own nuclear programs, triggering an unprecedented arms race in the Middle East. Faced with this scenario, the world is in a complex dilemma. Western powers need to decide whether to opt for a new cycle of diplomatic negotiations, even without guarantees of transparency from Iran, or will resort to the use of force again to try to close the Iranian nuclear program definitively. On the other hand, Iran also faces its own crossroads. Internally, the country suffers from economic crises, social instability, and popular pressure. But at the same time, the most conservative sectors of government and the armed forces see in the nuclear program a strategic deterrent tool against external enemies. The decision to resume or not the large-scale nuclear program will depend on the careful evaluation of these internal and external factors. The only certainty so far is that the Iranian nuclear program has not been completely eliminated. Despite attacks, sanctions, and isolation, Iran keeps active essential to rebuild its nuclear capacity in a matter of months if so. The future of this crisis remains wrapped in uncertainties. Diplomacy still tries to find gaps to resume dialogue, but with each passing day without international inspections, the possibility that Iran will go discreetly in its program. The coming months will be decisive. Any suspicious movement may trigger immediate military answers, rekindling a conflict that threatens not only the Middle East but the entire planet. And in this high-risk geopolitical game, where words weigh as much as missiles, Iran continues to challenge expectations, keeping alive the shadow of a possible nuclear bomb, while the world watches, apprehensive, not knowing what the next movement will be.